Hey gang, today finds us in Wisconsin, and actually we're about smack dab in the middle of the state, a place called Scott. Small cemetery here called Rosedale Presbyterian Cemetery. Very small, and the church is here. Normally, again, we talk church, it's graveyard, cemetery, but shows it breaks the rule, it's a cemetery. Anyway, we're here to talk about one of these buried alive stories. We've talked about these stories before. There's no doubt that they have happened back in the 1800s and before, and we know that from history. Now there's people who say, oh, that didn't happen and this didn't happen, viewers from the past. You know what? That's fine, guys. Live in your bubble, but we're just going to tell true history here. Although the history on this specific story leaves me with some doubt, and we're going to take the walk and talk about it, and bury this woman that was purportedly buried alive. And it happened, I guess, and this is part of what the conjecture for me personally is that I guess it happened in a place called Black River Falls, which is, oh, I guess as the crow flies, about 100 miles northwest of here by Baraboo. And I'm thinking, you know, how did she get here? If she was buried alive or died there. Anyway, we'll talk about it. But it happened back in the 1890s. Now, in the 1890s, there was a depression, and there were all kinds of depressions that were happening all over the country, some bigger, some smaller. The Black Friday, the Great Depression, but there was a depression in this area that hit there were mines, there were big lumber mills here, and everything just went down. And when I say here, now I'm talking about Black River Falls, and at the time, things obviously just went major downhill for everybody. Without work, people actually some families were even starving. A lot of families got out of town. Now you have the harsh winters of Wisconsin, Minnesota, you've probably heard of, so it was really bad, and then diphtheria swept through the town, took a lot of children, there were murders, there's all kinds of stories associated with it, and they called it back then, and even today, the curse of Black River Falls. So as this was happening, I guess this woman was buried alive, and I guess it would have had to have happened here. So let's take a walk, let's talk about the story. We don't have far to walk. This is actually a very small place that you will see, but it has some interesting stones, and we're near the center of the cemetery, and before we actually walk straight to her gravestone, I'll tell you the story, or we'll look at some stones now. As I said, it was a bad time there, and the woman's name was Sarah Smith. So in studying the history of this and doing the research, I found a lot of stuff from bloggers and historians on the Black River Falls that just kind of made me feel like people are making stories up. You know, the witchcraft, Satan came to town, paraphrasing. And all this bad stuff was happening, and magic and murders. So what I did is I tried to distill down to more what I think is kind of the real stuff. And where do you go? You go to the Historical Society, right? So we're in Columbia County here. There's a historical site that has a few paragraphs, apparently from the newspaper of the time. And I'll read it to you. On Wednesday last at the Rosedale Cemetery, so that would be here, the grave of Miss Sarah Smith, daughter-in-law of John Smith, formerly of this place, was opened. The purpose of removing the remains was to move her to an adjacent lot. Now, on opening the coffin, it was found that she had been buried while in a trance, as she must have came to after being interred, for she had partly turned over and the right hand was drawn up to the face. The right hand was drawn up to the face. Her fingers indicated having been bitten in the agony of finding herself interred alive. Now, she had been buried, it says, for 13 years here. And I want you to just imagine, can you even imagine what the sight was when they opened the, well, at the time it would have been coffin, and, you know, she was probably curled up, her hair, 13 years decomposed, not yet a skeleton, her dress, her shoes, and there were probably dried remnants of flesh bitten. So that's pretty creepy, and that is believable. But I want you to just, you know, in my mind's eye, I'm trying to picture that, and I'm sure people were not making that up. It said persons have been known to have lain in a trance for a period of 6 weeks and then revive, it says in the article, and I'm going to tell you again that that's probably not the case. I mean, we talked about Stephen Small and his grave, Stephen Small with the blue barrel. And by the way, we are at her stone right here. He probably just had hours to live when you're put in there. Even if you're in a coma, I would maybe give it a day, but you're not going to live for weeks and weeks. Well, let's check out the stone here. Sarah A., wife of Anderson Smith, died March 27th, 1884, age 31 years. 6 months, looks like 6 months, 23 days. And it looks like there's a prayer underneath. And look here at her death date. She died way before this supposed depression of Black River Falls. Way before. So this is another debunk of this connection to Black River Falls. So as I stand here, I do believe the story happened, but what I'm trying to figure out is, you know, Black River Falls, 100 miles away. It's not making sense to me. Why, you know, she died there. How does this story connect? Guys, somebody help me. How does this story connect to Black River Falls and all the curse of Black River Falls? I mean, let's separate things. This probably happened. People were not embalmed until near around the Civil War started, you know, coming up, and not until the 20th century, early, you know, 1900, 1910, started to become a little more popular in the urban areas, but not out here. So 1884, she's not embalmed, and, you know, so this is believable, but you guys tell me, how's this all tied to Black River Falls? Just not making sense to me. But I figured I would come out here anyway. There is a grave, there is a story related to Sarah being buried alive, and that part I guess I believe. So, you know, here's the big disconnect for me with all this. This is kind of the crux of it. I mean, if she died in Black River Falls, and again, that's the tie-in of this story, right? And they had to bring her body, supposedly dead, and she's in the coma or the trance. They've got to come over 100 miles to get here. You know, there was no highways. There was no pickup trucks or hearses to scoot her over here. It was horse and carriage, or horse probably and a spring wagon. Now, how long would that take to go 100 miles down the trails? Hours? No, days. She bouncing along. I mean, for her to stay in a coma, I don't know. Just not buying that part of it. I would just say it just happened here, but I do believe it happened. There are naysayers. Hey, knock yourself out. But let me just tell you, this not only happened here, this not only happened in this country, this happened all over the world. And you get into the early 1900s and before, it was not uncommon. And if you want to argue, go for it. But you're living in a bubble. not only did it happen, I mean, it's what makes it unbelievable. I don't know, but some people just don't believe it. But fact is, it happened. Could not imagine. I could not imagine the sight of Sarah. It's very sad. It's a very sad ending, and I just a very sad deal. Just a torturous end. Rest in peace, Sarah Smith. Rest in peace.